When you bought one of these new from Josiah in Halifax, part of the purchase price included the fact that it came by train, and you as the purchaser would have to meet it off the train with the man who came from the factory. He would help you get the crate onto the back of your lorry, and take it to your workshop, where he would take it out of its crate, set the press up, strip it down completely with your workman looking over his shoulder, and then he would build it all up again. He would oil it, he would put a chase in that was an experimental chase, and he would run that chase off, and therefore your workman knew absolutely everything about it. Originally the nuts are much taller than standard engineering nuts, and this is the story is that this is because Wade's used to make wool weaving equipment, and in the wool weaving industry all the workmen had to carry their own spanners and be able to adjust their own machines, and he applied that to the Arab press. They say that, although I'm getting too old to try and do it, that you can take the press apart and two men can put it back together again. In other words, there is no part that is so heavy that two people can't lift it. But I think with this crown folio Arab, I would not want to lift the main bed of the press at the back, because it is such a huge piece of casting. But everything else comes off, and I managed to move one once on the back of a motorbike in parts, in pieces, from London to Oldham. Took 4 trips, and it was a big motorbike, it was a 3-wheeler, but these things are possible. Phineas Gordon's big improvement to the Arab printing press was that he put a cam inside this wheel, so that when the press is open it stays stationary, and when the press is closed it stays stationary, so that the whole thing gives you more time both for dwell, in that being closed there, and also more time to take out the piece you've just printed and put in the piece that you're going to print next. And that's the most important thing. That's what differentiates an Arab from any other kind of platen press. Okay, first thing you've got to do every morning is oil it. And the oil holes are everywhere. I've never seen an oiling chart, so essentially you're going to have to go around the press and find where all the oil holes are. And essentially they are wherever there are two pieces of metal running against each other. The press doesn't have any bushes or bearings, it's all plain metal on metal. And because it's plain metal on metal, it's got to be oiled. If you don't oil it, then the whole machine is going to wear out very, very rapidly. Now this particular press was brand new in 1905. It was owned by a printer. He passed it on to his printer's son, and I bought it from that chap's widow. So I know it's always been looked after. I can tell because when I bought it, it was standing in a pool of oil, because of course the oil just drops out through every shaft hole that you've put the oil into. Okay, let's see, there's one for the treadle itself at the top, there's one at the bottom of the treadle, and the only ones I can't reach from the front of the press are the 4 round the back, 2 at the top of the press, oh, I should say 5 because the disc needs one as well, the ink disc as it turns, 2 at the top and the same again at the bottom. And that's it. And once the thing is oiled, it's good for the day, but not good for any longer than the day. Push the flywheel away from you to start the motion. Let the treadle travel up on its own power, and then push it down yourself with your foot, so you're not fighting the treadle at all, and you'll find the whole thing runs very smoothly. It's quiet because unlike a lot of American platen presses, it's got 2 leather straps here, and the rollers go on those leather straps, and that's why it doesn't sound like a clunky beast. The only noise you can hear is the click of the ratchet and the ink disc as the ink disc turns. Originally, when these presses were sold, this would have been a rubber blanket covered in cloth. Very few of those have survived, and there's certainly nobody making them new nowadays. And on this particular press, I've used a piece of book cloth which is fitted onto two bars, one at the bottom and one at the top. And I have a better method now of providing for all the packing that you might need in the make ready of the press. So I'm going to take this off completely. There we go. And this bar is part of the original, and you can see what you have to do in order to make this work. You have to punch holes in the cloth exactly a distance apart so that they will wrap around this bar. But we don't need to do that. You can get rid of it and throw the whole thing away, open it up again. Now this is so simple, I can't believe that nobody else seems to have seen how simple it is. This is a pocket made of a material called Melinex in England, called Mylar in the United States. You can buy these pockets from a company here in Oxford called Conservation Resources. And all I've done is, it comes as a pocket that's welded on three sides, so you can actually put your ephemera that you've collected inside it. And all I've done is I've cut one of the welds off the short side and I've cut the weld off the long side, so it's still welded along this bottom edge. So what I've got is this pocket. Place it on the platen and make sure I've cut it to the right size, which as far as I'm concerned I have done. I will never be printing this far away from the centre of the chase. This is double-sided tape. Two squares of double-sided tape. Cut one of them in half from corner to corner and put it on the Mylar Melinex pocket at the top. Turn it round and do the same at the other end. One there. Turn it back. Take the You be quiet, dog. There's no one there. There is someone there. So that's the top done, so I can bring the bottom up easily. And just smooth it down so it's nice and flat and even, no crinkles or creases. And there we are. That done, any packing I want to put, I can put in there. When I get to printing, I can print, because there are no lays, there's no lays that come with the machine. There was an add-on that you could get that made it possible for you to put a lay screwed into here, and it moved on a sort of parallelogram which gave you a bottom lay, and because it was a parallelogram, the side lay that could be attached to it was automatically at 90 degrees, but unfortunately they don't seem to have survived. I've only ever seen one person who's still got that original piece of equipment, so this makes it possible for us to do without that. When it comes to printing, I can print the first copy straight onto this Melinex. I can then position my printing paper behind it in exactly the place I want my paper to be, so I can see the printed image on this top pocket and I can see where it's going to sit on my paper, and then I can, using Pritt stick, put a lay exactly where I want the lays to be. And we'll go through that in practical terms in a few minutes time, but that's the way to do it. And there is absolutely no difficulty. Then all I've got to do is, with a rag that's been damped with white spirit, wipe that image off this Mylar pocket and just carry on printing. It makes everything so simple. When you're buying old ready-made Zincos, they're always worth checking. You see, this one, according to the micrometer, is 0.917. So if I was using it with type, I'd have to put that extra thou underneath it to print with. But I think since I'm just going to print it on its own, I don't think we're going to have any difficulty with it. Yeah, it's correct. It's close enough anyway. The printed matter as close to the centre of the chase as you can. And that's always the case. Take that out. Whoops. Sit in there. Do it. That'll do nicely. It's easier to put ink on than it is to take ink off, so always start with an absolute bare minimum of ink. If you put too much on, cleaning it off is awful. Form into the press, drops it nice and snug, lock it in. Now I've got two frisket bars on here, and they are going to stop a problem that could occur. If you didn't have the frisket bars, then this top layer that's not affixed can stick to the type, and because it's stuck to the type, get caught up in the rollers. But these frisket bars should pull it off all right. But I'll go slowly at the beginning just to make sure. Let's put the impression on, just to make sure that it doesn't get caught. Because if it does, I have to catch it with the edge of the knife. No, it's fine, and pull it away. Right. What I've got here is no impression at all, so I'm going to put some packing in, and I'm going to use as packing the same paper that I intend to be printing on, and that's approximately the right place for it. And now let's see if we get an impression this time. That's 3 sheets. And that gives us something like an image. It's not the whole thing. Now, the position I want this to print is across the centre of this piece of paper. So if I fold the paper in 4 and then open it out and fold the 2 wings in, I've got the centre line from my mucky fingers. And now I'm visually centering it. I'll take those out just for the time being. I'm visually centering it and getting it in what I consider to be the correct location on the paper. And that looks good to me. And what I'm going to do now is put the bottom lay in, Pritt stick, because it's water soluble adhesive, on the back of a bit of 6-point reglet, and I just butt it up to the bottom of the paper stock, and there is my lay. If I now take this out and open one wing and again centre it under that top layer of mylar, so I'm using my original central point, thus, and that gives me the position for the side lay. Once again, piece of reglet, that will sit nicely there. Take that piece of soiled paper away. I had 3 pieces of the paper stock in there in order to get that impression, so I'm putting 2 back, and if necessary, if this packing slides, I would put a piece of tape across each of these 2 corners to hold that packing in place, but I don't think it will do. And I'm going to take that soiled piece of paper and put it in place now. And I'm going to take a post office elastic band, put it over the 2 frisket arms and run it down to the top edge of the paper, so it will act as frisket to pull the... Actually, let's put it on the bottom edge first and put this one on the top edge. And that will ensure, I hope, that the paper doesn't stick to the type, or in this case the image. Let's see if we get one off it. Let's take a look for position. Well, I can see from that I need more impression overall, that the image itself is not centred on this piece of paper. So to centre it better, let's open this out, put it back in place up to that original lay. That looks to be about 4 m's white space there, 2 m's white space this side. So if I move this 1 m, that side lay, and slide this across, I should now get a centered image. Let's turn it round. This is all scrap paper now. Turn it around and try it on the other side, but also add another sheet to the packing. Let's see how the image comes out this time. Not too bad. Now centred on the piece, or at least closer to being centred on the piece, close enough to suit my eye. Okay, not bad at all, not bad at all. So what I'm going to do now is get a piece of rag dipped in white spirit and get rid of this ink image on the mylar. Then I'm going to get 2 small pieces of card and tape them to the bottom lay so that it acts better in terms of feeding the paper to the bottom lay. It will hold it to the bottom lay better. Don't need to do that for the side lay. I really don't think there's any other adjustment that I need to make beyond clearing the decks here, throwing away the rubbish and starting to print. Right, this stuff's called Filmoplast P, and it's like sellotape, but it's paper tape with adhesive on one side. I think the box costs about £15, and I got this from Shepherd's Bindery in London, and it's a paper repair tape. So I'm taking just a little piece off. I'm using my bench knife and I'm laying this on the bottom lay, and then using the bench knife to make sure I get the angle. What I'm trying to do is seal the gap that might come about between the bottom lay and the mylar sheet that's behind it, which has been known to happen. So that when I feed the paper, it can't accidentally get under there, as it would in that instance. Right, it's got to now stop exactly where the lay is. And I've cut 2 small pieces of cardboard, Pritt stick again, onto the bottom lay, well away from where the image is. And that will just make it easier to ensure that there is no misfeeding of the paper. In other words, the piece of paper isn't going to fall off every time I feed it to the bottom lay and slide it along. And the only other thing I'd like to show you is the use of type high bearers. Do you want to swing around this side a little bit? These 2 pieces here, which you can see are taking ink from the rollers, are type high bearers. Now all I use is old pieces of wood type border line, but you could just as easily use liner type slugs turned around the wrong way, or any type high bearers that you can buy from Monotype. Monotype used to cast them. Strip material could be used, but you do need, if you're only using 6-point, you need to put 3 or 4 pieces together so that you get a decent width. And the point of them is that as the rollers come up, they ensure that they are at exactly type height. You don't have to worry about any wear on the rails if you're using type high bearers. One problem with type high bearers, of course, is that they will print if there is something each side to print on. And the way to stop that from happening is to have 2 pieces of paper, once again using Pritt stick, and run the paper up the frisket so that now, instead of printing on anything that's actually on the platen, they're printing instead on these pieces of paper. Just check that didn't move. That's good. Okay, and we should see if it's working or not by folding this down and ensuring that that wood is exactly in line with paper. So the type high bearers, any ink on the type high bearers is now going to print on this paper, because if it prints on the mylar Melinex sheet or it prints onto the platen itself, then you might pick some up on the back of your piece of work as you're putting your piece of work into its place. Now the other thing I've noticed is that the packing has slipped, so I'm going to use that paper tape, just fan these out a little, and take some of the Filmoplast paper tape. You could probably use sellotape for the same purpose, but the adhesive on this is water soluble, so you don't get any gunge left behind after you've used it. And that will just keep the packing in place. And now, at last, I ought to be able to print. And let's see, we'll get rid of the scraps. Make sure the whole work area is clear and clean. Find a box to put everything into. Have it on the side table here. Rubber fingers in place, first piece of paper in, and we should be off. Walter Partridge recounts in his autobiography how as a 12-year-old lad he first got a job in a print shop somewhere in West Yorkshire where they were using an Arab platen, and the master's job was to set the press up, and his job as the lad was to run this at a speed of 800 to 1,000 impressions per hour. I don't want to work that quickly, and I think that the relatively relaxed pace of a platen press that's operating on a foot treadle is ideal for a letterpress printer. I have heard people complain that clearing up is a tedious job, but it isn't, and it doesn't take long. First and essentially, a pair of rubber gloves, because you don't want that ink pigment in your fingernails. White spirit, regular old white spirit from B&Q in my case. 2 rags, one dirty-ish, one cleanish. A little bit of white spirit on the rag. And start with the disc. And this can all be done from the front of the press. Half of the disc done, turn it round and do the other half. Now hopefully there's enough white spirit on the rag to leave a little residue on the disc. Turn the flywheel to bring the first roller up and clean it as you turn, making sure that you start on the second roller in time, back to the first, more on the second, more on the first, and the third is now in place. Need a little bit more white spirit. There we go. Right, that's the first roller finished. That's the second roller, third roller. Okay, that's all 3 rollers cleaned nominally. However, let's take them up to the top. Turn this rag around a bit. Clean this off. What I want is just a little bit of white spirit on the image. And at that point, with the rollers at the bottom, stop. Take the chase out. Wipe the type off. So that's nice and clean. Wipe off the bearers, the type high bearers, so they're good and clean. Now if necessary I can come back and scrub that with a toothbrush dipped in white spirit, but in this case I think we'll probably be alright. So I can get that out of the way, and all I've got to do now is remove all the residual white spirit mixed with pigment. And this is the second rag, so this is a cleaner rag, a dry rag. Hasn't got any white spirit on it at all. And that's it. Job's finished. What I try to do though is to remember to put a bit of white spirit on the clean part of the rag and clean the bed of the press, because it's surprising how much filth it picks up. Not just as dirt, but as little tiny bits of glue or paper or whatever is in the atmosphere. And of course, if I'd been printing type rather than an illustration, it could have made a great deal of difference to the quality of the printed image. And there we are. Now at this stage, if I'm not going to require the same lays, I would remove these lays straight away. As it is, I'm going to add some black ink text to the image, so I'm leaving the lays alone. But otherwise I would take the lays off, and where the Pritt stick had left any surplus residue on the Melinex or Mylar pocket, I'd wipe that off with a wet rag, wet with water, because that's what Pritt stick is. It's a water soluble adhesive. Okay, but for now I'm leaving everything exactly as it is, because I'll be using exactly the same chase layout to do the second colour on that job.